Alrighty, GoPro, welcome back to another video. We've got the Ozone Moxie Power right here, size 26. We're going to do a little review on this wing. I've had this wing for a handful of months. It is a training glider, a beginner wing, and we're going to talk about all of those things and what that means. I've had quite a few students now fly this glider. I've got some opinions on that. We're going to take it out to the field and go for a quick little flight. It's the middle of the day. We're in the middle of a beginner training program here at Backcountry PPG. It's day 6. We just had a first flight this morning. We're going to hopefully have a second flight this evening. But we are sneaking in a quick little flight in the afternoon, pop a quick review out there on this glider. Now, generally speaking, I don't like to immediately review wings, meaning I don't like to get a wing, go fly it, and review it the first time I fly it, especially if it's got a certain purpose, like this Moxie being kind of a beginner glider and like the Kona 3 being kind of a mixed glider. I like to use them for their purposes. I like to actually test them out, put them in the real world, compare them to what's there before making a review. That's just my preference. I like a review based on a little bit of experience. And so like with my Viper 6, I flew it for couple of months back to back with my Viper XC before reviewing. Anyways, moving on. This is the Ozone Moxie Power. If you're not sure what this glider is, it is a very comparable wing to their Ozone Mojo, which is their ENA certified beginner wing for new pilots. Super tame beginner glider, designed for the new pilot, and I've got all the specs we're going to compare in the sky. Let's walk this leading edge, make a nice clean layout. I give all my students crap about their layouts, and I rate their layouts on a scale of 1 to 10 based on how good it looks, so who would I be if I didn't try and have a nice layout? Anyways, I'm going to hurry over to the motor. I'll join you again once I'm hooking in. All right, guys, we're back. Ozone Moxie Power. Let's go ahead and go do this. This glider is in stock configuration, stock brake lengths. Everything is as it would come from the factory. Let's go ahead and run our motor up. She's running good. Check airspace, make sure no one's about to land or launch in my way. Big deep breath, visualize a beautiful inflation. Let's do this. Run, lift, throttle, brakes. Woo-hoo! Check lines, check lines. Okay, so we are up with the Ozone Moxie Power. This is a paragliding wing, the Ozone Moxie, converted to paramotoring. It holds an EN certification in all of the sizes, which is super cool. I actually will have to double check to see if it's DGAC certified. DGAC certifications is oftentimes what paramotor wings are certified with. I am out here at the Salton Sea, minus 200 feet below sea level, rocking an off-grid aviation throttle. Just setting cruise control, adjusting the dial a little bit, hands free, just flying one side. Okay, so the Ozone Moxie Power is designed to be a very similar wing to the Ozone Mojo Power 2. These are both very beginner wings, ENA certified. For those of you that don't know what EN certifications are or how they work, ENA is the safest certification that they have. Then it's ENB, ENC, END. It's very uncommon for paramotor wings to be EN certified. It just is an expensive, lengthy, difficult process that manufacturers tend not to send their wings to. It also doesn't work super great with reflex profiles. Now this Ozone Moxie is not a reflex profile. This is a classic profile glider. So you may ask, like, who is this for? What is it? Why would you buy it? Well, this is going to be a beginner glider. There are a handful of things that we look at when we're considering what makes a glider beginner or not, or you could say key indicators or differences or design characteristics. Well, one of the main ones that we tend to look at to reference what kind of wing it is aspect ratio. Now, if you're not sure what aspect ratio is, it's essentially how long the glider is and how skinny the glider is. If you have a high aspect ratio glider, you have a very long and skinny glider. If you have a low aspect ratio glider, you have a very short and stubby glider. Now this Moxie Power is a very low aspect ratio glider. In fact, it's actually lower than a Mojo Power 2, which is going to be its direct comparison, and it's lower than a Spider 3. The Moxie Power's aspect ratio is 4.81 for the flat aspect ratio. Mojo's is 4.9. Now generally, the higher the aspect ratio, the more performance that you get. Obviously, there are far more variables than just aspect ratio alone, but that's one of the ones that we tend to look at to help tell us how the glider is. So a 4.81 is really low. For another comparison, the Ozone Spider 3, which is comparable to an ENB, it's not technically EN certified. The Spider 3 is a 5.1. So again, the higher you go in aspect ratio, commonly the higher performance the glider is. And performance is kind of a broad term. It means how fast, how agile, how much energy it carries, how efficient it is. That all kind of wraps up in the word performance. This Moxie Power is really not designed for performance. It's really designed for a beginner paramotor pilot just venturing into the sport, looking for their first glider, who doesn't want to step up to the Spider or Roadster like most beginner paramotor pilots do. You know, when we have a new pilot come through our ecosystem here at Backcountry Paramotor, we often give them a Spider 3. There are some exceptions, there's some contingencies where we'll put people on a Moxie, but it's kind of what we're looking at. Now, another indicator that, again, it's only one of the several things that determines the performance of a glider that we can kind of use to judge how performance-y, if that's a word, a wing is the cell count, okay? So the number of openings that are up there is what they would call the cell count, as well as the non-openings, okay? Now the Moxie Power cell count is a whopping 38. To give some perspective, 40 is the Ozone Mojo Power 2, so there's 40 on the Mojo, and 48 is the Spider 3. So the Spider has 10 more cells than this Moxie Power does. Same wing size, 10 more cells. Now what that all means in the science of paraglider design, who knows? I don't have an exact answer on that, but that is one of those indicators that tells us how much performance this wing has. Sorry for being backlit again. I know I'm terrible. I'm trying to fly into the sun so you can see my beautiful face, I suppose. All right, so there's one of those other indicators. Now, another thing people tend to wonder about with a new glider is if it's heavy fabric, light fabric, as that's one of the things that determine how it launches. So the next thing we'll discuss is the fabric. The Moxie Power rocks Domenico 30D fabric top and bottom. So same fabric, top and bottom. The Mojo rocks the same fabric on the top, but a lighter fabric on the bottom. And the Spider rocks a much lighter fabric for both top and bottom. Now where you'll see that come into play is weight. So for equal size to size, size 26 to 26, the Moxie Power is 11.86 pounds. The Mojo is 10.95 pounds, so almost 1 pound less. And the Spider is 10.27 pounds. So about a 7 pounds less. So the Spider is quite a bit lighter. The Mojo is a little bit lighter. This is a heavier fabric designed to be more durable, tougher. Now, oftentimes with heavier fabric, you get harder launches because you have more weight you need to lift. That is not the only characteristic that determines the ease or difficulty of launching. It is just one of them that we can look at. And so by that data alone, the Moxie Power should be harder to launch than a Mojo or Spider. And I'm going to share my opinion here in a moment. I wanted to talk first about specs. Both the Moxie, Spider, and the Mojo, so all three, rock sheathed lines. So if you look at these lines, there's a covering on them, or what you refer to as a sheathing. It is not unsheathed. That some people just really prefer sheathed lines over unsheathed lines. I don't really mind either way. I know unsheathed lines have more of a tendency of balling up on the ground and being tangled, whereas unsheathed lines are oftentimes less prone to doing that, for whatever reason. So there's kind of your specs. Now, as far as price point goes, the Moxie Power comes in around $3,200, Mojo around $38, and Spider at $4,250. So it's about $1,000 less than the Spider 3. There's all your specs. Now you might be wondering, what makes the Moxie different than the Mojo, and which one do I prefer? Good question. Let's talk about that. So you might be wondering, like, what really makes a difference between the Moxie and the Mojo? Well, firstly, there's winglets on the Moxie. So on the wingtips, there's these little fins that come out. And the idea behind that is it's going to help reduce oscillation. So if you're not familiar with what oscillation is the natural rocking back and forth, or the rocking back and forth of a paraglider. I'll see if I can get it to rock back and forth. Okay? So now if I do nothing, we'll oscillate. We experience oscillation partly because of the pendulum effect and partly because of inertia. So see, I continue to rock back and forth. This is oscillation. Now, oscillation for new paramotor pilots isn't necessarily the best thing. It can be a little unsafe on launch or landing. Landing in specific, if you have oscillation, I'll put a little clip up here, you can get set down sideways and it's just unfun. Well, I will tell you, these winglets do an amazing job at stopping oscillation. Actually, it does such an amazing job at stopping oscillation that students don't even learn how to practice stopping oscillation because it does such a good job at stopping it for them. So it's almost a catch-22. It's so good at stopping oscillation that there is no oscillation for students to learn how to stop. Now, I love that, and I hate that at the same time. The Mojo, in specific, is really bad at oscillating. You fly a Mojo, dude, and it's just constantly rocking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, which is, like, fine if you're good at stopping it. But when you're coming into land as a new pilot, dude, you're just constantly rocking back and forth, and as instructors, we're given the commands, and students are working hard to correct it, which is great practice and a great skill for students to have. But it's this thing. It's clearly a thing. The Moxie, there's none of that. You, like, go up there, you're like, all right, you know, we're coming into land, gotta watch that oscillation. And they're like, what oscillation? I've never heard of this oscillation thing. Because there isn't really any oscillation on the Moxie, which is bittersweet, like I said. Because on very first flights for like brand new students, I actually like having the ability of not having to worry about oscillation. So when I fly someone for like the first time, I don't want to worry about oscillation because they're so fixated on so many other things. They're thinking about so many other things that having to also try and correct oscillation for some students can be really difficult. Now, we've done it for a lot of years, all right? Yeah, and that's fine. But if I can put someone on a Moxie for like the first 5 flights and maybe even 10 flights where we don't think about oscillation, we're more so, you know, focused on glide slope and landing on target, which is glide slope, and landing into the wind and the proper flare timing, it's like one less variable we have to think about at the start. And then we switch, and I like to switch them either to a Spider or even to a Mojo, because then it oscillates, and they have to practice correcting and controlling that oscillation, which now that's just one more variable to add to the puzzle, and we're not adding it prematurely. So I like that. I actually love it, and as the year goes on, I'm going to add more Moxies to my training fleet to have at class for that very reason. Because when I fly students for the first time, not having to worry about any oscillation is a game changer. I love it. I can focus instead on making sure I get them on target, and we work on glide slope, and we work on flare timing. Now, the next thing that I will point out and talk about is its launching characteristics. So Ozone is notoriously known, for good reason, for having amazing launches. And this Moxie holds true if you trim it out. I don't like to launch the Moxie trim in. It's very sluggish. Same with the Mojo. I hate launching the Mojo trimmed in. It just struggles to kind of come up when it's trimmed in, and you have to work a lot harder to get it up. You trim them both out, and it inflates beautifully. Beautifully. It inflates beautifully. I like that. I like the launching trims out. And then one thing that we do is we tend to compensate for the trimmed out with a little bit more brake on launch. I know most schools, most instructors tend to have students launch at brakes 0, so hands all the way up. I think that's silly. I don't do that. I think of brakes kind of as flaps in an airplane. You give it a little bit of brakes and you slow down the takeoff speed. You help lift weight off of the pilot, and you overall make the launching easier. And when you trim this Moxie out, you've got that brake range to give without stalling it, which is really nice. And so I've had no issues launching it. Students have had no issues launching it. Inflates easy. It doesn't shoot really hard and want to overfly like some wings, which is nice. It kind of comes up, and you do have to give it brake to catch it if you're running really hard and you have the trims out, but nothing more than anything else. As far as ease compared to a Spider, it doesn't launch as easy as a Spider. A Spider is going to be so effortless to inflate. That's what it's known for. That's what a Spider writes home about. The Moxie doesn't do that as easily. I don't know if you'd notice much of a difference, but there's a small difference between the two. As far as landing goes, it's got a juicy, juicy brake range, especially trimmed out. You got all the flare in the world. You can hit all of it, hold it, and it just floats you down nicely. If you're trimmed out and you at all give brakes back after set down, it does want to overfly you, so you got to keep your brakes down. But that's technically the proper technique for any glider, including a Spider 3. If you land and hit those brakes, or throw those brakes up, it's going to want to overfly you. So launching and landing, I mean, it does it great. It's an Ozone. I think apples to apples for the Mojo. I would say the Spider 3 still launches easier. I'd say the Spider 3 is probably a little bit nicer for landing too, just because it has a little more speed that you could burn off into flare authority. But again, I mean, it's apples for apples, and I don't think anybody beyond like those really, really nitpicking are gonna notice. So the next thing is speed. That is one of the places that this wing does not shine. There is not a lot of speed to this Moxie power. It's just not fast. It's not what it's made for. If you're gonna go on a cross-country flight with a whole bunch of people and you're flying a Moxie, you can expect to kind of get left behind. I haven't done any speed tests. We could probably do so right now as we're cruising up and down wind. And so let's go ahead and do so. We're currently cruising at 25.6 miles an hour into the wind. All right, we're now going downwind. Let's see what our speed is. We're going, oh, I guess we're not going downwind. We're going 25. I would say 26 miles an hour is about what you can expect out of this wing trimmed out. So that's really slow. It is not a fast wing. It's not made to be a fast wing. Don't expect it to be a fast wing. You know, if you're wanting more speed, the Spider 3 is going to fit that. The next thing to discuss is maneuverability. There is none. It really doesn't want to turn. You can see me getting it to turn, but it doesn't really want to turn. If you're looking for more maneuverability, the Spider 3 is going to take that cake. But guess what? When you're looking for a beginner wing, brand new student glider, having one that doesn't turn is exactly what you're looking for. So I love that. It doesn't turn very well. And I mean, it turns equally as great as a Mojo does. It just doesn't turn as great as like a Spider does. So you can get it to turn, but it doesn't roll like a Spider does. It's not made to roll like a Spider does. You know, again, it's designed to be that really beginner-friendly early wing, just like the Mojo. So then let's compare, then let's talk about collapses. All right, GoPro, here we are. Gonna point you up a little bit. Let's do a couple little collapses. So first thing we're gonna do is what we call big ears. Okay, that's just asymmetric big ears, where you just collapse just the little wingtips of it. I'm gonna point that camera up quite a bit more there for you. Let's go ahead, we're gonna turn out towards the water. So there was your big ears. You can see it doesn't really care. Now we're gonna do an asymmetric collapse, guys. So there's 50% of the wing. Just half the glider is collapsed, as you can see. We're still flying. A little tiny bit of right brake to maintain direction. If I go right hand up, or left hand up, I should say, and I hold that collapse, we're still pretty much flying straight. Descending, not too bad. We could actually maintain altitude with an asymmetric collapse like this if we really wanted to. All right, so half the wing's collapsed, half the wing is flying. No brake. Maintaining altitude. Easy peasy. And it pops itself back out. All right, so like you saw, I mean, collapses aren't really a big deal in the slightest. The glider just doesn't care. That is one of the things with being ENA certified. That's what the Moxie is. It's an ENA certified wing. So it collapses super great. It's actually fairly hard to get it to collapse too. There's like quite a bit of pressure on the A to get it to collapse, which is pretty nice. I'm fairly impressed with its collapsibility, recoverability. So far, quite satisfied with that. So now, like, my overall final thoughts on this, I have found a preference to this Moxie Power over the Mojo Power 2. The Mojo, for the most part, is really just a school glider. It doesn't make a ton of sense for pilots outside of the training environment. And the Moxie kind of falls in the same premise. It's actually more beginner, the Moxie, than the Mojo. So it's less agile, less performance than the Mojo, less roll rate, all those things, which is like crazy, I know. But I prefer it over the Mojo because it doesn't oscillate like the Mojo does. So if a student is going to end up on a Mojo, some of them do, I would rather put them on a Moxie. And I'd actually be more inclined to recommend the Moxie than I would be to recommend the Mojo. Now overall, for newer pilots, I'd put them on a Spider 3. That would be my go-to. That's always my recommendation. I just think the Spider 3 does it so well. It flies so great. I love the Spider 3. But if the Spider 3 doesn't tickle your pickle, that's going to be where the Moxie Power comes in. All right, so that was my impromptu, rather quick, in-between training sessions, Moxie Power review. If you found this video useful, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and comment down below what you thought. If you're looking to get into paramotoring, we do offer a 10-day beginner training program, as well as a 5-day adventure training program. Visit backcountryppg.com for more information on those things. I'm going to get down and go help these new, excited students get airborne.